what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Unstoppable Marketer podcast. With me, as always, my co-host Mark Goldhart. Mark Goldhart, how are you?
Mark Goldhart, that's my name. Yep. Sounds weird.
Mark Halvard Goldhart.
You know when some days words sound weird? That sounded weird.
Halvard or Goldhart?
Just my name,
Mark
yeah.
Goldhart.
Yeah, it's just in general. But
Marcus
I'm doing
Goldhart.
great. Marcus. Yeah, I'm doing great. Excited to be here. We are in for a treat.
We are in for a pleasant treat.
Very pleasant one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's all I have to say
we're
about
going to
that.
learn a lot. I'm excited.
Yeah. We have a guest today that I'm been excited to have on for a minute.
Yeah. We've talked about it for a long time.
We've talked about it, but we've never talked to him about it.
Yeah, it's true. Mainly my fault because I have a hard time remembering to text people.
Yeah. Normally, I'm the one who does the
My fault.
scheduling, and this one fell on Mark, and so that's why.
So just so you know, we've been thinking about you for months. Acted on it recently.
Well, let's introduce our guest here. Today we got Alex McArthur with us today. Alex is former CMO at Purple, former CMO at Kizik as of recent. First podcast he's ever been on since he left.
Second.
Is it? Dang
Second.
it.
Oh, we can lie. Maybe if you make this one live first.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
we're
Then
going to
you
just
win.
publish this one first.
Yeah, we're going to skip the publish. And now just consulting, right?
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Awesome. How are you, dude?
Doing great.
Welcome.
A lot of change in my life recently.
Yeah.
Obviously, exiting Kizik, and excited to be here with you guys. I don't know if you remember the first time we met. I saw you speaking
I do.
in Vegas, and I'm like, man, this guy's sharp. And
Yeah.
I walked up to you. I think I told
Yeah,
you that.
did.
And then had a similar experience with Mark at a dinner. Like, I like this dude.
Yeah.
I like how he thinks. So I'm glad to be here with you
Yeah,
guys.
that was one of my actual favorite stories. So that was my very first speaking event I ever spoke at.
Okay.
And I got asked to speak at the Magic Show in Las Vegas,
yeah.
which
I remember
most
that.
people don't go to the Magic Show
I was there.
to listen to speakers. I didn't know that. I think it was my first year at the Magic Show, by the way, for people who are listening to this, because I say it all the time. People are like, a Magic Show. The Magic Show is a big
magician convention.
yeah, it's a big convention full of magicians where we're all learning to,
Now I'm thinking of Joe Bluth.
Yeah.
Can't
And
get him out
now
of
I'm
my head.
thinking of,
Arrested Development.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. No, so it's like
We
a
demand to be taken seriously.
big like
it.
apparel, fashion.
Yeah. A lot of footwear companies.
Yeah, like where
companies.
you go for two reasons. One, you go to find manufacturing. Two, you go to get your product in stores,
Yeah.
like get in retail. So I was at it, got asked to speak about something that I can't remember, and they were like, when I was prepping for it, they were like, yeah, there should be expect maybe 100 to 200 people in the room, and I'm like, oh, sweet. And I was way excited and I'm going to be famous. I'm going to do this. And then I get in this massive room and there's maybe 20 people.
No, there was more. There was like
No.
60, man.
No, I mean, maybe there was.
It was
but
a big room,
But when
they
it's
were
a
spread
big
out.
room and it's
Yeah.
scattered,
Everyone's spread out.
I mean, it
yeah.
felt like 15 people,
Yeah. Me and Monty, the CEO of Kizik,
Yeah,
were sitting
yeah.
right there front and
And
center.
you guys
we had
came up
no
to
idea
me?
you were from Utah.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, had no idea.
Well, yeah, they were so cool. They came up to me and they're like, I can't remember.
That's
but
at the
said
early
it.
days of Kizik, right?
That's
Like, you guys were
nobody knew our name.
Well, that was
Yeah.
like your
that time.
first. Well, because were you guys trying to? Do you guys know Jeff Buckwalter?
Sounds familiar.
Monty does.
Yeah, I
Because
don't know.
Monty a part of OGO?
No. Well, I think
He
he
was
might have
counsel?
been. I think he might have been involved externally with his law firm at the time.
I think so
Possibly.
too. Anyways, Jeff Buckwalter, who was with us, we
Yeah.
worked with him. I feel like Kizik was trying to get him to come
Hmm.
and say, hey, because he's a finance guy.
Mhm.
Like, hey, come help us out with some finance stuff. And so, yeah. But yeah, you guys were so that. I was devastated in the whole entire speaking moment because I didn't think anyone was there. I had prepped a ton. And then you guys came up to me and said some very kind words. And so I really appreciate it. Yeah. And that makes me feel even better. I always thought you maybe just knew who I was and you were just trying to be nice to me. So,
I know who you are now, and seriously, I was impressed. That was
well, thank you.
that was the best part.
I got to go find a way to.
Which is a great way of showing who Alex is as a person. I think everyone who
point.
interacts with you has a good story about how even though you've been leading these companies through massive success, you do take time to hang out with the little guys.
Dude,
Yeah.
there's no little guys, man. So that's my favorite part of business is the people, right? Like You guys have had Brett Swinson on this
Mhm.
podcast, who was with me at both Purple and Kizik, and like, dude is just so good. Good
Yeah.
person, good marketer. And like, when you can build a great team and you differentiate your product, you kind of can't lose.
Yeah.
And so for me, networking, getting to know people, and I hate the word networking, like it's connecting with people, building relationships
Yeah.
with people is where the value really comes in for me. So
Networking sounds transactional.
it does.
Very
Yeah.
much so.
I've always
Yeah.
used it, tried to use it as a positive word, but I guess there's a better way to say it. Maybe it's just connecting with
The
others.
problem
Making
is, I feel
friends.
like you have to explain it.
Yeah, making friends.
Yeah, like you have to. But if you say that, like I'm gonna go make some friends, like you're 36. What do you mean you're gonna go make
I'm
some
lonely.
friends?
I'm
You know?
lonely.
Like, not that
I
there's
need
anything
friends.
wrong with making friends at 36, but like,
I think it's great.
you know,
I'm 47,
yeah.
and like I don't act my age, and people tell me I should act a little more executive, but like it hasn't worked for me.
Yeah.
And I have more fun spending time with as many people as I can
Yeah.
meet.
Everyone, yeah, for sure. So okay, so let's jump into some stuff. So tell us, you're at Purple, then you went to Kizik. Two companies in Utah that have had some really good success.
Well, two D2C unicorns in a
Yeah.
way.
Very much so. Yeah.
Right.
Purple was the D2C unicorn in what?
16.
We launched in
15.
January 2016.
Yeah,
went
2016,
public a couple years
17.
later.
And now Kizik is like, Kizik is the brand that people are talking about here in Salt Lake. That is the brand you got to understand.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of love from Toby, the CEO of Shopify.
Are they?
Yeah.
There's been some, yeah.
Yeah.
We got featured on the site, and
Yeah.
have you seen him mention it recently?
I just remember when they did that. They did something about you guys were one of the guinea pigs on their program. I don't know what program it was.
Deliver, which
Deliver,
is now, they've
yeah.
now taken out of Shopify.
That's
Oh,
right.
really?
Now pulled out. Yeah.
Cool. So
Fortunately.
tell us about your journey at Purple. Give the like everybody a little kind of rundown of what you were doing at Purple, what brought you over to Kizik, and what.
Well, actually, can we start before that? Because
Sure.
I think
Please.
I think most people listening to this podcast know about Purple and Kizik now. What were you doing before Purple? Like, how did you arrive to Purple? Because Purple was such a massive success.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about where were you before and how did you find yourself in Purple?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that I got maybe noticed in Utah was orange soda.
Yep.
Mhm.
A lot of people now don't know what it is, but a lot of people that are, some of the best marketers in Utah worked at orange soda. So I did that. Like my first job right out of BYU, I started out in computer science, realized I didn't want to sit behind a screen, like talking to people, like connecting. So
Too social.
yeah, switched to communications, which was probably too far the opposite way. A lot more girls in those classes.
There
That
you
was
go.
good.
Yeah,
That was positive.
Nice.
And you didn't have to take calculus.
Yeah.
I liked calculus though.
So from computer science, my interest there, thinking that's how I have to make money in the future. Like tech is the only way to make money. I worked at Exactware for 4 years right out of
nice.
college.
Yeah.
And then the people were awesome. It was a great company, but it was so boring.
Yeah.
Just miserable. And I met this guy named Jay Bean, which started a company called MarchX. Sorry, not MarchX. He started AHA, which was acquired by MarchX, which was the first pay-per-click engine before AdWords. So Jay was just super sharp. Got me into digital marketing. He started Orange Soda. I was one of the first employees to join.
Tell everybody what orange soda was.
So it was a small business internet marketing provider. So at the time, only big companies were paying for SEO or paying for AdWords. We were trying to offer something that, a small business could pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to at least be in the game.
Yeah.
And it worked. We saw success. A company called Deluxe acquired us, which again, nobody knows checks anymore, but Deluxe was the company that owned the check cashing business across the country.
Okay.
So they acquired Orange Soda. It was a small win and got me kind of hooked on entrepreneurship. And so my whole career, I've kind of gone back and forth between consulting and in-house. And if a business exits or there's some kind of transaction or a change, I go back to consulting. So far, every time one of those consulting deals turns into my next big thing. And so that's kind of been the rotation. So, Orange Soda, did some consulting. I was at SEO.com for a minute. did some additional consulting. My friend Chris at the time was the first person brought into Purple to help kind of consult, and he brought me in as well. And yeah, we caught fire pretty quickly. It was a blast, and like so interesting how all of a sudden the world was talking about mattresses. It wasn't just because of us. Obviously, Casper had raised hundreds of millions of dollars. There was Tough to Needle and Lisa and a bunch of others. But like in the end, we drove the most revenue with raising the least amount of money, which was pretty cool.
Casper probably did a really because there was what was that study? I remember you and me were talking about this in 2018, where Casper was like bleeding like tens of millions of dollars every year.
Yeah, but they did build a fairly strong brand.
Sure, well, for sure.
Well, I think the difference between Purple and the other mattress brands, and it's actually a great little case study, I think, for a lot of people and the troubles that they're facing now in D2C, which is at the time in D2C back in 2010 to 2018, a lot of brands were just built on arbitrage opportunities. And a lot of those mattress brands were just trying to take this direct to consumer, right? People forget that's what it meant. Like direct to consumer, you were cutting out the middleman.
Mm-hmm. That was our first message, like,
right?
That's yeah.
And so you're cutting out the middleman and giving the consumer better deals, supposedly at the beginning. Which at the beginning there were better deals for. So Casper was basically just trying to go to a manufacturer that did Tempur-Pedic type mattresses, and then just go, okay, we're just going to cut out the middleman. Where Purple, what differentiated Purple was you actually guys had a unique product. It wasn't just an arbitrage of something that already existed. And I think a lot of brands are now facing that difference, which is the arbitrage opportunities aren't really there anymore, right? With cost CPMs, you're not really getting a better deal necessarily buying D2C, which now brand building is so important. But I'd love for you to speak on that. Yeah, great marketers care about product and differentiation and the story behind that product. And it's not just, can we perform 1% better? And I feel like that's what was happening. I mean, at the time, a lot of people thought there were 300 bed in the box players. Yeah. To me, 299 of them were the same Chinese made foam material. Yeah. I'm generalizing. Sure. I'm sure that's not fair. Yeah. No offense to those guys. But, that's how it felt, right? Like, we had the only thing that was different, and we really wanted to lean into that story. And Purple was a weird name. So we, I know now people are kind of tired of humor, but at the time it wasn't that way. And we leaned into it, and it worked, and it created a lot of awareness. And over the next 3 to 4 years, we really tried to elevate the brand. And I felt like that was pretty successful, but it did make it harder to create that mass awareness. I have a question because Purple is known for some of those humorous videos at the beginning, right? I think that was kind of the heyday of the slapstick comedy or these awesome demos that turned into like humorous presentations with the spokesperson ad. Yeah. What, as the CMO at the time, because you guys were one of the pioneers in this and using these types of video productions, how did you decide on that was the way to go? Because it was a big investment at the time. Oh yeah. Yeah. Again, Chris, my friend Chris Knudsen was a part of that early. Another guy named Dan Bischoff. He had an agency called Content Hook, and we were all brainstorming different things to do. And the Harmon brothers were a local down the street, partner that was having a lot of success. And so the Goldilocks story was the first one that people really remember. But in terms of choosing to do that, some of it's, to be honest, like, I'm a big believer in ringing the cash register early. I think a lot of people try to over perfect their brands and then assume that sales will follow. And I'm a believer that I want to ring the cash register along the way, self-fund as best as possible, justify the next big effort. And I also believe that you can pivot a lot more than people think they can. Now, when you say pivot, are you saying your brand, with your brand, you can pivot and use the tactics you have to. And humor was really working, or we thought it could really work. And there were a couple people that had successes. Again, the Harmon brothers had a couple big successes, and literally they're right down the street, right? Yeah. So made sense to take a swing at that, create some mass awareness, and then
it worked, and people started to demand our content, and kind of our internal theme became feel better, meaning the mattress makes you feel better.
Yeah.
But even if they don't buy, how do we make people feel better with a little bit of content that can be memorable and engaging and fun? And that'll create more of an emotional response than just being the same old black and white website like everybody else.
Well, a Purple mattress made my wife feel a lot better.
Good.
Nice.
Woke up every morning with bad neck, bad shoulder, and then we got a Purple, and 4 years later, she's great.
Now she's
You should get you as an affiliate.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
We'll
Get this guy a code.
Get her a testimonial.
Get this guy a code. I want to talk about something you said, which is interesting. Like, so Mark and I see this all the time where brands get so caught up in, we call it marketing to marketers, right? Where everything has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect because of what their meaning what my peers are going to seek, right?
I call it ego marketing because I feel like they do what's based off of what makes them look cool to other creatives. And to me, that's frustrating.
How do you break through that? Because like at Purple, for example, did you have, like, you said your mantra is like, let's ring it early, right? Versus perfect it. Because we don't know if perfecting it is actually going to do anything for us.
Which, just to define that, is just prioritizing sales.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
like you're
making it memorable and working towards a brand, but not putting the brand, like everybody tells you have to protect the brand to death. And I do believe that too, but your brand won't matter if you can't get some sales. So there's a balance, but I feel like the balance is so out of whack, like generally.
Can you walk through how brands should be balancing that? Like how did you have to convince the team at Purple? Did they just like follow you because they felt the same way?
At the moment, I mean, I would never compare us to like Dollar Shave Club or something like that. Like everybody, that was a massive, massive campaign. We had some of that flair, and people were looking for the next thing. And we noticed how they were kind of only known for one spot, and we wanted to do more things to keep that fire going. One of the things that we talked about internally a lot is how high is high. Like nobody knows how big we could be. Let's not just be content that we're more than happy with the results we've had, but let's continue to swing further and further. So I never felt any resistance. If anything, it was the opposite. Like the inventors, Tony and Terry Pierce, the guys that invented the material, they get a lot of people give our marketing team a ton of credit, but those guys were constantly like, hey, everything you're doing is working. Why aren't you spending more? Why aren't you doing another video? So we had positive support and pressure from them. So a lot of kudos to them for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we see a lot of brands get stuck in that phase where they want, like you said, they want to protect the brand. And you say you can pivot a lot more than people realize. Can you dive into what you mean by that for those who are listening that might be overprotecting their brand?
Yeah, I think the average brand has a very small box, like a tiny little box that this is exactly who we are. And for some companies that works. I think it's very few. I mean, even Nike extends their brand more than people realize. They have some pretty out there stories that I think and I love Nike, right? Apple has so many different types of ads, but people look at their brand and think it's so tight and it's always this way.
Yeah.
To win online right now, you can have a tight brand where your packaging, your website looks great, but then your LPs and your landing pages and your PDPs and your campaigns can extend pretty far and capture more eyeballs if you just keep looking the same. So to me, when I talk about a tight brand box and brands that don't adapt, I feel like they're just being too safe, and it becomes egocentric where it's, hey, my fellow creatives think this is the fashion sense that matters right now, and then everybody does the same thing. Totally. That's where I get frustrated, is that to win you have to look like everybody else.
Right.
Like that, to me, that's completely contradictory to good marketing, standing out, being memorable, being differentiated.
Yeah.
So that's where I get frustrated, is the great brand minds out there want you to follow the trend that everyone is doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't follow trends and be different.
Yeah.
But I like being a part of brands that have a unique angle to them.
Yeah.
And it feels like you can have more success, and it works for me.
Dude, so. I know I brought this up a couple times since you brought it up, but I thought this this just is a topic that we talk about. It just happened, maybe because we're so passionate about it the same way you are. But like your example of the transatlantic accent is, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Is so spot on with this, which is like,
Some call it the mid-Atlantic, but you know, doesn't really matter.
which is like, hey, like the whole world used to speak different, but because of social media, now all of us speak the same, right? We've all just
so like
adapted,
everybody's
so we all
adopted a
look-
Californian accent,
yeah.
a West Coast accent across the entire country. When in the past, we used to have these pockets of strong regional accents, and they still exist to some extent. You still have like Midwesterners and, you know,
You got
Canadians
Southerners
and Southern, yeah,
and
exactly.
Southerners, but Southerners do not talk near, like that accent is not as strong as it used to be, right? Like it's fading. Each generation's fading along with vernacular, right? Like you actually have regional words that are dying.
Yeah.
So there was a graph recently about soda and pop,
It's changed.
and it's totally changed. Like it used to be very regionally based if you said soda or if you
Yeah.
said pop.
Oh yeah. Well, Utah
And now
was,
it's just soda.
Utah was primarily pop.
Hmm.
You know, like are you from Utah?
So I'm a perfect case study. I'm from North Carolina, lived in Tennessee for a long time, had a really thick Southern accent, and over time, I don't know if I forced it out or because of media and everything, it's gone. I mumble now, so hopefully you can hear me here. But yeah, I had a thick Southern accent as a kid.
Yeah.
Well, for you, it's you moved, right? So you were obviously surrounded by it. But I think what's interesting with media is it permeates geographic, like beyond geographic boundaries now.
Yeah.
So if all the media you consume is produced in California and they're hiring Californians, and eventually you're going to start talking like Californians.
Yeah, the more we talk about being different, it's interesting how we're all becoming more the same.
Yeah,
totally.
You know?
Well, and you look at like brand logos nowadays, and they're all the same font, black, thin writing, versus like in the 90s, it was like, you remember like the Sega Genesis logo and the Nintendo or MTV, or like these really like pop, standout, kind of somewhat aggressive like logos.
Well, imagine if the world was black and white in every way. Like it's beautiful, full of lots of color and variety, and like brands are becoming less and less so.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book Zag before? You know who Marty Neumeyer is?
I know the name, but I have not read the book.
He talks about this. I bring this up way too much on this podcast, but like he breaks this down because he's a branding genius. Like he's the guy that I'm going to mix the story up because it's been a long time since I've read Zag, but he if I remember right, he started a creative agency and he went into, I think it was Atari, and told them that he had like Apple's account or something like that, just made something up and just won this massive client based off of like a lie, essentially, and became this like really, really well-known guy. But he talks about, you know, he brings up this, he kind of identifies this chart called the good different chart, which is like brands sit into a quadrant of 4, right? Like if you look at a y-axis and an x-axis, right?
And then where's the z?
Yeah.
No, we're not going 3-dimensional.
The y-axis represents good, and the x-axis represents different. And so if you're in Q1, you're good, but not different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the majority of people sit. If you're in Q2, you're good and different, and that's where you really want to be. Q3, you're not good, not different. Obviously, you don't want to be there. And Q4 is not good, but different. You know? And so he talks about this, like so many brands hover in Q1.
And I think
because it's the safe zone.
I think the problem that a lot of brands have, and I'd love your input here, Alex, is if you want to be good and different, you have to be willing to be different and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you have to at least know what it feels like to get into that, because you're never going to just...
And be willing to pivot. Yeah,
like and pivot. Yeah. Because you can't just expect to be good and different and in this perfect little quadrant all the time unless you're making some mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's like, we're all digital marketers here, right? Or have experience in it. And everybody talks about testing and learning. I don't think brands do that. And I feel like you can't move at the same speed as ad iterations if you're changing things that affect packaging and overall brand appeal. But I feel like you can test it and experiment and and you'll find things that break through the get people's attention. And I don't know. I just get really frustrated with how all of the great brand minds out there and creatives tend to narrow you down, and that feels like winning, and that's frustrating to me. I just feel that pressure. The bigger you get, the more you're pressured to look like everybody else.
I have a good comparison to that. Is I feel the same way when you listen to rich people tell you how you should work with a balanced mentality. Right? It's like they're trying to tell you how they work now, but that's not how they got there.
No way.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, well, you need this balanced life. Like, I'm all Zen now. You need to be mindful.
Good example.
And you go, that's not how you got to the success that you have now.
Right.
Now, I'm not, maybe, right, in the message they need to reiterate, they're not trying to tell people how to be rich. They're trying to tell people that they're not happy because they're rich, right?
Sure.
And I know some of them talk about it, but at the end of the day, most people are listening to them because they are successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get successful by doing all these little practices they do after they've already reached success.
Right.
And that's kind of what happens with these branding people that you're talking about, is a lot of voices out there reach success following some template at a company that they're no longer at. And then they kind of repeat that message over time, but that message is already faded.
Yeah.
And so it just narrows everyone down because everyone's still listening to them. But it's like, dude, your company was successful 10 years ago. Like, the trends aren't what they are 10 years ago anymore.
Yeah.
Again, that's why it's so vital to have that experimental mindset, right? Like, that what made Google so great during its good years, all those stories that people heard about 10% of your developers' time on experimenting with products. And that's when they were launching other products that made a difference. And now it's just too big to turn, right? But yeah, it's hard flexibility is so hard with size, right? The bigger the business gets,
Totally.
the less flexible it gets. It's so hard to protect that.
Well, the other thing that's so interesting is I do think that, as I've started like small brands before, and that have scaled to be bigger brands. And it's funny, as a small brand, we look to these bigger brands, right, for inspiration.
And they wish they could be you.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We look for the inspiration. What are they doing? What channels are they on? What agencies are they? I mean, you're looking at what tools are they using, right? You're looking at all of these things. But at the end of the day, most brands, like Kizik is a 9-figure business, and there are so many people who don't even know who Kizik is.
Yeah.
So this idea that I need to protect my brand, when you actually think about it, is really silly. No, I'm not saying that you shouldn't protect your brand, but like that's what's stopping you from growing, is by protecting a brand. These brand decisions you feel like you have to make when in reality, if you're a $1 million business, you don't really have a big brand.
Can I bring up
to get hurt, right?
Can we get biblical?
Please.
Well, it's really just the story of the talents, right? So many brands and small businesses are just, they're the man with one talent that went and hit it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like you might lose one talent, but like you're very small. And if you don't go risk it, then you're
not learning and gaining another one.
You're not going to gain another one. And so you're just stuck in this plateau, in this phase, in this limbo, so to speak. And you're always looking at these other guys, but you're too scared to make a move because you're like, oh, I just got to protect my one little thing. It's like, no one knows about your one little thing. There's nothing to protect.
There's not a lot of damage that can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
how did some of those like big lessons and that growth on the Purple side, like how did that help you at Kizik, like going over to Kizik?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, trust comes with success sometimes, and some people give you more trust when you've had more success. So it's unfortunate that sometimes the best projects are handed to people that have had the wins before, right? Like that's kind of how it works, right? Yeah. And so sometimes I've had things just dropped in my lap because of a success from the past. But for this one, I mean, for me, I've had the privilege to like pick the projects I want to work on. And, as I looked at Kizik, you know, there were things I didn't like and there were things I did like when I first met the team, and the people were great. And to me, that's the most important thing. So like, I can work with this, right? They're flexible. They're willing to try things. Things that I learned were, even though my background's in digital, I think a lot of digital marketers get so attached to performance that they're not really creating enough awareness and brand lift. And so that's one thing that I've tried to do different than most growth marketers, which is, you know, we spend $1, we make $3. And like, to me, I'm really trying to create massive lift, believing that sales follow search. Cause that's a metric you can track, that if I'm making a big campaign and we all of a sudden our Google Trends goes up and search lift is substantial, you know, that's a quicker metric to look at than, you know, these quarterly or yearly brand lift studies that say, oh yeah, more people know about us.
Right.
But to me, like, sales follow search, and that's a really simple thing to measure for me. I know how much search is coming in. I know when we're pushing something, if search lifts.
Right.
So I know there's a million different metrics that marketers follow, but that's one that I believe in. And so really took that into Kizik from day one. We did have to spend like a year, like making some more, what I would view as like approachable shoes. Some of the shoes were like leather and heavy in the beginning.
Yeah.
It was a little bit slow to course correct that. We kind of rebranded the site. It was more of a maroon color, changed that, and then really started to catch momentum from that point on.
Yeah.
Brett joined us and Blake, who you guys know. At first I was just working with a local ad agency, and I think we 4X'd it, then started to build the team, and then just started to lean into all the different channels.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. For me, it was, there's a lot of ways to do things. I want to do it with the right people that want to win together and with as little ego as possible. And then when best ideas win, all the stuff we always hear is what I'm really trying to live by. And so, yeah, it was an awareness play with obviously a massively differentiated product. So again, had a huge advantage, and I'm completely aware of that.
Is that what drew you to it? Like, I know you said, I know you said the team was awesome.
So I believe in demonstration.
Yes.
And I love demonstration in marketing. To me, it's fun. People think it's gimmicky. I feel like people crave it. They want to see why things are different. And again, to me, that's that narrow brand box. Everybody's like, we're a little bit more stylish than this. I'm like, but why are you better or different? You know?
Yeah.
So this was,
it's like the old QVC approach.
Literally, I think I've told this story 100 times before, but the day I left Purple, I was introduced to the Kizik team, and I looked at him like, this is like too good to be true for demonstration's sake.
Yeah.
You know? So that was really fun.
Yeah. Cause it's so funny. And this is maybe, you know, me as a younger marketer. But I remember I was introduced to Kizik probably, when did you start?
So I left, I was at Purple from October 2015, launched in January 2016. I think we went public in end of 2018. I left March of 2019 and started consulting for Kizik in 2019.
Okay.
March of 2019.
Yeah. I mean, I probably heard about Kizik early 2019 would be my guess.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking there's no way, but I was looking at the brand. Like, the shoes were ugly.
Yeah.
The brand was terrible. You know, it looked like just shoes that you'd get for my great grandpa. And so like my naivety was just like, I was looking at the brand, but I wasn't looking at the solution that it was solving, which was what got you guys into the market.
Yeah.
It had unique proprietary technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and again, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else by any means, but I think a lot of marketers would look at that and think, oh, pass. And to me, I look at like what it could become, and I don't care what people think right now. Like, we're going to find a way to take steps and make it better. So maybe that's a flaw in how I think, or I don't know. But like, to me, it's, you know, I think a lot of marketers want easy wins, and they tend to take deals or projects that like, oh, I can just make a little tweak and we'll figure it out. Like, to me, Kizik needed a lot of work. And,
sure. Yeah. Well, what we say all the time is like, behind every great marketer is a better product.
Oh yeah.
Right.
No doubt.
Like, it doesn't, like, we're just
every time.
I think that great marketing used to work when there wasn't a massive array of brands and competition and TikTok creators and attention grabbing, like you used to be able to market to people without having a great product and you could win.
Well, also because you had arbitrage
Yeah.
in pricing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of D2C companies could be cheaper, where now,
Yeah.
like, are you really getting that good of a deal by going D2C?
Versus,
Yeah.
I would argue that the delta has shrunk
oh,
almost to nothing.
significantly. Significantly, yeah.
Yeah, and I think good marketers care enough about the product to influence the product too,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, both Purple and Kizik, like
Yeah.
they were nothing and grew rapidly, and there wasn't separate product teams in most cases, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously there were some specific people, but we were able to influence that. Like Kizik, everything was internal. Marketing team pushed really hard for external tech. I'm not wearing it today, but like that's the best selling shoe is the Athens, right?
Yeah.
That external tech is memorable and inspires people to ask like, what is that? You know, so.
Well, here's a question, because a lot of SaaS companies have product marketing teams, and in e-commerce, you don't tend to see that, right? You have marketing and you have product.
Yeah.
So how you just talked about a little bit of that unification or synergy. Like how do you get marketing teams and product to work together to better the brand overall? And I'm sure there's some pretty intense internal fights that have happened
For sure.
Maybe not at your companies, but
yeah. No,
how,
I mean,
how do you bridge that gap in a company?
I don't think I've ever perfected that at all. Like at Purple, in the beginning, there was a guy named Russ in there that had invented a lot of the machines that made the material, and came up with a lot of stuff that Purple did. He was great to work with. There was no product marketing team, but the marketing team would push like, people are responding to this, and he'd listen. So that was easy. As it got bigger, there ended up becoming product marketing, and it became slower. And that's when I tend to leave when things get slow. It drives me nuts. But Kizik, everybody wanted to win. There wasn't a product marketing team, but Steve and Craig, one of them's more on the tech side, and one was more on like shoe design side.
Yeah.
Like they were so great to work with for me. But now that it's bigger, and you're ordering much more inventory, and it becomes a little bit more of a slower, multi-year planned out process. So it's a real company now, right? It's not it's not the same.
Not a startup.
Yeah, you're
it's
not
a startup
making
anymore.
decisions on the fly, and
Yeah.
What's your like coolest memory at Kizik?
Coolest memory at Kizik? Shoot. Man, that's a tough thing to narrow in on.
Or most memorable?
Yeah.
Either or.
Strange. This is a weird thing, but it's what's coming to mind right now. Is like, I feel like we moved offices like every year, and we were forced to because of the growth. And like, moving with everybody was always fun because we weren't big enough. Like, the big local companies that get their big fancy building and they show up and their desk is all set up.
Yeah.
Like, moving together is fun, and to me, that's what's great about growth and marketing. Is like, you're moving, doing this together, and you're doing the little hard work, but it's fun together. So like, I'm just, thinking of moving offices with Blake and Brett and, Jason Lee, operations guy, like, experiencing the change that happens because of the growth.
Yeah.
Is what comes to mind.
Which is a weird, on a human level. Yeah.
Which
really
is a weird thing to be in my head
bring
at
up,
the moment, but
I like it. That's why I asked.
yeah,
I like it too,
Off the
because it exemplifies what good marketing is about, which is establishing human connections, right? We talked about this pre-podcast, networking. Networking is kind of a transactional term. I'm going out to meet people just so I can turn it into a transaction at some point, where you talked about, you just like meeting and knowing people and helping people, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. And so your memory of Kizik, like, I think that fits you as a person, which is the growth was great, but it was that human moment of the growth that was great. And as marketers, we're trying to capture those human moments to transmit to the masses. And those human moments often have to capture some kind of emotion. So you talked about humor being utilized. How do you help a brand, or what would you advise a brand right now to find their human moment? How do you transmit that and market it?
Yeah, I think most marketers, have a sense of how to do that, but I don't think a lot of them have the courage to like recognize sometimes the truth of what it is within their brand. And it depends on sometimes if the founder or the inventor wants to be the face, you have to connect that story to them, and you can't, just because it's trendy to be X right now, you can't always force that. Everybody says authentic and all these things. Like, what if the story that you've crafted that you think looks good doesn't represent the real people behind the business? It'll come through eventually in interviews or something. So I think there has to be a little bit of courage to like match what matters there. That's hard to define and like get to, but you feel it as you spend a little bit of time with people. And I don't think there's an easy answer there. Like, for example, Mike, the guy that invented the concept of hands-free, you mentioned OGO. He is just an inventor at heart. And like, even though footwear is fashion, in the end, like the reason most people buy shoes is because of how they look.
Right.
Comfort plays into it, but it's mostly fashion.
Yeah.
There's that age curve, right? Like comfort becomes more important the older someone gets.
For sure.
But because he was such an inventor mindset and creator, we had to make part of the brand innovation. Like it had to be, even though everybody told us that doesn't make sense in footwear, like that doesn't work. Nike's talked about it for forever. They're the only ones that can get away with that idea. It worked for us, right?
Yeah.
Like we leaned into it because it's who Mike was and it fit what we were trying to do. And Craig internally, who's, chief innovation officer, like every day he was creating something new and we wanted people to see that. So I think it's recognizing who you are and what's true to the brand. And I know we all talk about that, but I think, again, because people limit themselves to that narrow brand box, they don't often have the courage to say, we're really this, but everybody tells us we should be this.
Yeah. Or even on the flip side, like, I think we're this, but we're discovering that this is actually what we are. Yeah. But we want to be this. Like, we want to be this, but that's not really who we are, Yeah.
I mean, everybody wants to be Nike and Apple and, whoever, but they evolved. Yeah. And we don't let ourselves do that. We feel like we have to jump to where they were. They all evolved,
Yeah, everybody wants to be on chapter 30 or 50 when you're on chapter 1, right?
Yeah, just remember all those celebrities were weird drama kids in high school.
And they still are when they aren't buttoned up and on screen, right? They're still their weird selves.
100%. I think about that all the time. Like, all those kids in drama in high school that you're like, dude, can you not be so weird right now?
You're just offending everybody who is in drama right now.
Hey, it's a compliment because those people turned out to be the celebrities.
And those people are the people who didn't care what other people thought, right? Yeah. And who are, a little easier to be more successful when you're not constantly looking over.
When you're okay to be a little different.
Yeah, when you're not comparing, for sure. Okay, so now that you've, as you said, like, okay, it's like every time I leave something, I consult, I get another thing, I consult. Now that you're consulting again, and now that you've been a part of like 2 very, very successful businesses, like what are some of the biggest mistakes you're seeing brands and marketers make on any given day basis?
Yeah. It's really interesting because everybody keeps saying, or what are you doing? Are you just hanging out? Or I feel like I'm working harder than I ever have, looking at tons of different deals and opportunities. And I am seeing some themes, like obviously the economy's a little bit down right now. Like it's not as down as people are acting. Like it's down and there's reason for concern. Consumer spending's down, SaaS companies are laying people off. So it's affecting all types of businesses, not just one area, but it's down a little bit. And I'm seeing people like completely scrap their marketing spend or completely, give up on certain things that were working for them. I'm willing to wager. I mean, I'm older than some, I'm older than you guys. And, I've watched multiple election cycles and it's always building up to the election that people get anxious and stock market's more up and down. And then it always tends to, maybe this time's different, but historically it tends to settle after that. But the difference this time is inflation's been pretty significant and made things a little bit more complicated for everybody with homes to buying everyday things like food. But so to me,
just on COGS alone, right?
Yeah,
inflation.
COGS.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Adds up fast.
So to me, I feel like people have pulled back a little bit too much. And so I think we discussed it before the podcast, but I feel like now's actually a really time to get market share. Like this is the moment to
As
grab.
people pull back, yeah.
As everybody else is pulled back, if you find a way that you can lean in without, hurting yourselves,
Yeah.
this is the chance to gain some ground
Yeah.
rather than waiting till everybody feels safe and
Yeah.
everybody leans back in and everything goes back up even more.
Yeah.
Kizik, one of our best moments was during COVID when everybody else was pulling back. We had a moment where we told a story about nurses not having to touch their shoes, right? Because this is when we were still all really, really scared of COVID. And we weren't trying to be fear-based, like, hey, we're an option here for you. And like, that's one of the things that got us momentum. We don't talk about it much anymore, but like that was a moment that really helped get Kizik going. So looking for opportunities in moments of fear.
Yeah.
Fear is the worst. And I think a lot of people are scared right now. And if they can settle down and look at the opportunities, this is a time to gain ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you said at the beginning is like you would always measure like if search is up, sales will follow.
Always.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that conversion isn't a problem. Like maybe you don't convert at the clip that you should, but if you're driving more search volume, that means people care enough to type in something that makes them learn about you.
So their intent is
high. Intent is high. Yep.
Yeah.
I actually like that because another way to think about a moment of anxiety or fear from a cultural perspective is as a marketer, you're always looking for tension. So you either have to create the tension and relieve it, or you can use just whatever tension's out there to
identify
relieve it. So
and
you guys,
relieve it,
you guys identified that fear, which was at the time, COVID was scary, right? There's all those deaths in Italy and nobody knew what it was or what it was going to be.
Yeah.
It hadn't mutated to the point where it is now where, it's obviously not as bad anymore, but you use that tension out there in the ether and then you showcased it into how you could relieve it with your product.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think tension is a great word that business owners and marketers should look for that moment. It's so delicate though, right? Like, 'cause you notice I like defended myself. Like we weren't using fear tactics.
Right. Yeah.
Because like you can take advantage of stuff and actually hurt your brand. So
well, there's been brands that have like completely folded because of that. Yeah.
Leaned in too hard.
Yeah. Well,
but I just feel like everybody's leaned out so far that they're not even in the game right now.
Yeah, there's fear tactics, but there's also using the tension. And I think, like you said, that wasn't a fear tactic you guys were using. You weren't saying you shouldn't tie your shoes. You were just showing, hey, look how much easier it is now for nurses who have to be extra hygienic during their shifts.
And truth be told, we didn't sell a lot of shoes to nurses, but the campaign stopped the scroll, got people interested. Again, people think they have to talk only to their demographic. In reality, their demographic wants stories, and those stories don't always have to be in the demographic.
Yeah.
They just have to be engaging to the demographic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. This has been awesome. Like, I had other questions, but you've kind of just answered them throughout the entire time. Cool. Tell us where. So right now you're up to you're consulting.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, ideas on what your next move is?
I'm thinking about a lot of different things. Have a couple great consulting clients right now. Looking for a couple others. Thinking about some really what I think are interesting ideas. Where one example, I won't go too deep into it, but I started out in tech. Now I feel like I'm labeled a consumer guy. Not that I care what people think, because I never thought I'd sell mattresses, never thought I'd sell shoes, right? Just it's when the right opportunity pops up. But, in Utah, we look at a little bit of consumer, a lot of SaaS.
Mm-hmm.
There's an interesting opportunity to productize services, which I think is fairly intriguing. Making national brands around services that become very regional and are very scaled or don't cross promote products very well. So that's something I'm thinking about.
Cool.
So maybe outside of product or SaaS, something a little bit different.
Cool. But using similar tactics from a brand perspective.
Maybe.
That you do on the consumer side for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, dude. Well, where can people find you?
I'm not
You're
very
present.
I'm on LinkedIn
Yeah.
a little bit on occasion. I try to stay off, but then I feel like get a little bit of FOMO and I want to know what's going on. So I get on LinkedIn a little bit.
Nice.
That's probably it. Yeah.
Love it. I have
Love
one actual last question.
Yeah.
Because it's just on my mind. Are you guys aware of what's going on with this Chipotle boycott?
No.
You guys hearing about this Chipotle boycott? So you guys know who Keith Lee is?
No.
Keith Lee is this guy who has become a famous restaurant tester.
A restaurateur,
Yeah.
whatever you
Where
call it.
he like he'll get something and he just sits in his car and he eats it and he rates it. And he just had such a way with words and people loved him that he has become, I mean, he will change a business overnight, like a restaurant's business overnight. So he would help like small businesses, like Hole in the Wall, Indian food place or something like that. And there's this big conversation right now happening at, do you guys like Chipotle? Do you guys eat at Chipotle ever?
Yeah, on occasion.
I mean, I don't eat there enough to like know, but there's this massive thing happening right now where like their costs have gone up so high, but their portions are like
Oh, they're decreasing?
so
Okay.
low.
And they're getting the heat for that, even though everyone's doing it.
Yeah, I mean they're getting tons of heat for it. Like have been for probably like a year, but then Keith Lee, this guy, gets up and he's like, and normally I don't do these big businesses, but I'm gonna like I just got Chipotle because I used to love it. And he like went in and rated everything, and it was like such a miserable experience. And you see him like open up his burrito bowl, and there's like 3 pieces of chicken in his bowl. And so he rates it like the whole thing like a 2 out of 10.
Oh.
And now there is this revolt against Chipotle saying, like what they're telling people to do is like either go in, order. If they don't give you the portion you want, then walk out while they're mid doing it, or like stop going like at all whatsoever. If you go just type in Chipotle in TikTok, I mean, hundreds of millions of views on every single one of these videos. And so I was just curious if you guys had like any thoughts about like what is going to happen to Chipotle and what they should do.
Probably nothing will happen to them.
Don't think so?
No, because remember when they had that
E. coli or
E.
whatever
coli
it was, or
outbreak and
salmonella.
everyone was mad at them, but then everyone goes back. So
Yeah.
maybe.
I think people can overreact to, meaning brands.
Yeah.
Corporations can overreact. I mean, they need to care and value their
Yeah.
customer and try to make the best product or service they can. But, I mean, when's the last time one of those moments killed a company? Like people thought Budweiser was going to die over their controversy.
Oh, Bud Light.
Bud Light.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think they
name
got
all those
hurt,
moments.
I
but
mean,
they're
they got
not
hurt for
dead.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has been damaging for some, but
Yeah. But they're still around.
yeah.
Ended up getting a big UFC. Like UFC.
Yeah,
like,
they just
Dana
signed
White.
with UFC as the UFC
Yeah.
sponsor.
Which is interesting because they were like, the UFC is so conservative.
Yeah, I mean, they're
So that was very
probably one of the
interesting.
more conservative sports leagues.
Oh, well, and Dana White is
And Dana White.
wildly conservative. Yeah.
Speaking of, I think from a branding perspective, we'll talk about Donald Trump really quick. For all the people that love I'm just kidding. No, but I think talking about that good different chart, right? You have to be willing to go into that bad zone. And yes, there's fallout that can happen. I'm not saying it's without risk. Like there's risk in trying to get to the good different zone. But if there's anything that you can learn from people like a Donald Trump or a Bud Light who have made a lot of errors in the past, right? A lot of these people just weather it out, right? And there's almost something that galvanizes their core group to them more.
Oh, yeah. When you
If you weather out a bad storm that, yeah, you made a mistake, but if you can weather it, you can come out on top. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on that, Alex, of weathering a bad storm?
Oh man, I feel like you're setting me up here.
Yeah, who are you voting?
Who will you be voting for and why?
Oh man. Yeah,
Because if like or hate him,
yeah.
like a Donald Trump, like he's like,
He's
how many times have people said it's over for him, but it's
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
And Bud Light, like everyone said it was over for them. It's not. Like
Yeah.
they'll probably be where they were anyways, like in 5 years from now.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's definitely made many, many mistakes. But the fact that the media goes so hard at him 24 hours a day, I think makes his base even more defensive of him.
Totally.
And so that's why he's not going to go away, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, I know you're not asking my political view, but like, I have to say, like, I'm done with all of it, man. Like, I want a new option. Like, I'm just tired of I feel like the extremes have gone so.
Yeah,
I'd love for
the
somebody
delta's
just
huge.
rational. I don't even care which side they're on. Like, somebody that cares about people to show up rather than winning the fight. You know? And I know you didn't ask that, but I just have to say it. Like,
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like anybody that represents us is there to represent me or my child or my wife.
Well, that's why
Like, I feel
RFK has become a big name, right?
Yeah.
It's because people feel like maybe he could be that
Middle
ground in the fight.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Americans feel the same way that you feel, which is just exhausted.
Yeah.
But from a branding perspective, we talk about this. If you have an enemy, it can
solidify
it can really help you as a brand.
It turns your followers into fans.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're not telling you to go be Donald Trump and be his influence.
But I think people get tired of the game and they see that it's like a fake bet. Like, you know how sometimes in sports, you know, that the media props up these rivalries or something, and like some people fall for it and most of them are just like, not again.
Yeah.
You know? And that's how I feel like politics has become. Like, it's such a fake, the moves, like all the individual senators and everybody, they aren't thinking what's best for my state, what's best for my people that I represent. They're all thinking about, how do I get points in my party?
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know why we went there, but
Mark was just trying to get. He was
stirred
trying to
me
get
up
some,
here at the
I was
end.
just trying to
man.
get. I'm
I
just
just
trying
want
to stir
Mark was
some
trying to
up.
get a hot
Yeah.
take because we know it'll do good as a social clip. You know, he was trying to get you to say, "I love Donald Trump."
I'm
No,
not
I'm
saying
for
that.
X, Y,
I was just
Z.
bringing up how he weathers the storms
Yeah,
as an individual. Whenever, like, you know, because we talked about like Chipotle.
He's a master attention getter.
Is Chipotle over? The reality is no. Like, I'm sure it looks like a big deal on TikTok, but guess what? Everybody, and this goes back to, I think, to just wrap it all up, the entire conversation here, even from the beginning, is Alex mentioned brands are scared of pivoting, but pivoting isn't that big of a deal.
it's natural. Be
Yeah.
ready for it rather than do it out of desperation.
Yeah.
So that's my tip for the day, is like proactively change rather than do it out of desperation.
Yeah, do it because yeah.
And most people don't know who you are, so it makes pivoting easier, right? You're not as big as you think you are most of the time.
Yeah.
And even if you are, you can weather it. Like, you can weather it and just pivot. Like, that's what Bud Light did. They pivoted, and now they're the sponsor of the UFC, and they'll probably be fine. And
Yeah. It's very true. Well,
So-
I think, yeah.
so I think that's to wrap it all up. Don't be scared to get dirty and test and try things, right?
Yes.
And pivot.
And be different.
Be different. Don't just be another
Sans serif logo.
sans serif and muted color brand.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end.
What about you, Alex? Where do you want to end?
You already quoted all my few good things that you summarized them right there. So,
Well,
yeah.
thanks so much for being on the podcast, dude. We appreciate it. It was
Thanks for having
long overdue.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. It's
All
fun.
right, everybody. Well, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Unstoppable Marketer podcast. Please go rate and subscribe the podcast, whether it's good or bad. We want to hear from you because we always want to make this podcast better. If you want to get in touch with me or give me any direct feedback, please go follow me and get in touch with me. I am at the Trevor Crump on both Instagram and TikTok. Thank you, and we will see you next week.